Welcome to the Crazy Cool Family Podcast with Don and Suzanne Manning.
A podcast where we share with you great insights about everything family from over 30 years of parenting 7 kids and over a decade of equipping parents through our Crazy Cool Family ministry.
So let us inspire and equip you to build your best family.
Are you looking for a way to go deeper with Crazy Cool Family? We have 2 amazing resources for you. We took the foundations of our book and turned them into guides. The 2 guides are called Building Family Relationships and Creating Family Culture. We believe going through the guides will take your family to the next level. Each guide has 6 sessions and focuses on building relationships and creating culture. The guides are made for individuals, marriages, small groups, and even men's or women's ministries. Click the link in the show notes to purchase your guides today. Do you have questions? Do you want to buy in bulk for your community? Just email us at info@crazycoolfamily.com for more info.
Welcome to the holidays. Welcome to Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's.
The holiday season, all the fun with family.
And yet, sometimes those siblings get together and...
Well, that's a good idea. Let's talk about the sibling dynamic during the holidays.
Yes, because sometimes those siblings get together and it is not pretty.
Well, yes, and I remember, when everybody was out of school and we're out of our routine and out of our systems, and everything feels a little bit more crazy and chaotic. Crazy and chaotic. The kids seem to be kind of off their routine.
Yeah, and there's the expectation of Christmas. There's so many different emotions going through. And so we're going to talk about sibling dynamics in the holidays. Okay,
yeah.
But
how do we knit our kids together so that they're the best of friends? We say that all the time at Crazy Cool Families. Siblings can and should be best friends, and then people look at us like we're crazy. So we're just going to say, let's use this time during the holiday season to really work on that relationship.
Yep. And before we get started with all that, we're going to do a foundational to set you up for your family this holiday season. We're going to do a foundational Crazy Cool Family exercise.
Yes, and those that have been with us for a while, we're going to just take you back to the basics, back to the Crazy Cool Family house and back to the dashboard within the house and all the different relationships.
And if you're new to us, you may say, what is the Crazy Cool Family house and what is the dashboard? Well, you'll have to go figure out what the Crazy Cool Family house is on your own. We're going to just talk about today the Crazy Cool Family dashboard.
But you can go to our website, crazycoolfamily.com, and there's all sorts of pictures there.
I wanted them to go on a treasure hunt.
You're
giving them all the answers.
Empower and equip. Right. They're still going to have to go on a treasure hunt.
Crazy Cool, our family dashboard is very simple. And we're going to do it visually, and we're going to give you a link in the show notes to a family dashboard. But it's so easy. Think about God is at the top of the dashboard. So you'd write God up there. And then you have, if you're married, below God, you'd have a husband and a wife. So you could just do it with an H and a W. And then below that, you put kid 1, kid 2. You can actually name everybody in the family dashboard. So just, however many kids you have, we would put 7 there. Kid 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Molly, Madeline, Macy, Mackenzie, Michael, Maddox, McCade. Then the fun starts. You want to take the fun?
No, just connecting them all. So connecting the parents to God, the parents to each other, the parents to each of the kids to each other. That's the fun part that we're going to talk about today, the kids to God.
Yeah, so you draw those lines, and we'd like you to really do that, to sit down and draw those lines, because what it does is it helps you to have a visual of all the relationships in your home, particularly you can see those sibling relationships. You can also see your relationship to the siblings. And those are the ones that in this holiday season we want to focus on. And so, it's really easy to do unless you're like us and have 7 kids and there's like 45 different relationships in the home. But we really want to challenge you to do that. And then look at those lines. Look at all of those lines and say, hey, which one of those relationships are going well? And which one of those are struggling a little bit? You might even, if you want to be an overachiever, you might want to rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 and say, okay, these 2 siblings are really getting along well. And these 2, not so much, and this one, oh my goodness, this one's terrible, or this one's is so good, or whatever, and really rank all those, and even think about your relationship to the siblings, because all of that's going to be coming. What happens is when you get everybody together and all of a sudden there's heightened intensity, there's heightened emotions or whatever, guess what? All of those things come out. And so we want you to be prepared for that as you go in the holiday season, and you get prepared by examining all of those relationships.
And because reality is your time together is driven by your weakest link. And so if you've got the 2-year-old that's constantly, being annoyed by the 4-year-old, then what it would look like to remove that stress, that tension in the middle of all of the relationships and the holiday festivities.
Because that tension creates tension for the whole house.
Oh, yes, most definitely. I say all the time that this was the siblings relationships was my number one thing I went after, because it drove me crazy when 2 of my kids or 3 of my kids were at each other. It made me stressed. It made the mama bear in me come out, and I didn't know who to go after, the child that was being picked on or the child that was picking on, because both of them had their reasons. And so anyway, all I have to say is that I really went after this. Like I said, it made me crazy, and I did not want them to not get along. And so we worked very hard for them to get along.
And then it even not only get along, but what if they actually invest in one another and learn to love each other, and to really, we're going to talk about how you can move that direction this holiday season.
And so so on the one end where I was saying I would get so frustrated with them, nothing blessed me more than they would when they would be in a room playing together. Like we would delay dinner, or we whatever we were planning on doing, if they were playing well together, I just let them. Don, just let them play.
Yeah, we really would say, listen to that. Hey, have you, it's like, wow, it's quiet.
Yes.
Wow.
Nobody's screaming, nobody's fighting.
Yeah,
yes.
And so let's talk about some of the things. What are some signs that before we get on, just let me remind you, go do the family dashboard. And hey, you might even put it up on your refrigerator and say, hey, this Christmas, here's our family dashboard. And one of our goals is that when we get to New Year's, let's say, we want all these lines to be better than they were before. What are we going to do? Just challenging your family to that. Because as we move into the next section of the podcast, it's like, what are some of those things that...
just along with that, I mean, if you've got older kids, then this is definitely an activity to include them in, and to ask them how can we make this line stronger? What kind of line would you say that you would have between you and your brother? Would you say it was a straight line, a solid line, a golden line, or a bright red line, or a fuzzy line, or a like lightning bolt line? What kind of line would you put there? And what kind of line do we want to have by the time the holidays are over?
And so what makes those lines fuzzy or not straight or whatever? What are some of those things that we struggle with relationally that are indicators of negative or damaged relationships? So, like, for example, obviously yelling, we go to yelling at each other, that's always the one that really just gets on our everlast nerve. But sometimes it's just ignoring each other. I mean, siblings can do a really good job of kind of just dismissing the other sibling and making another sibling feel like they're not wanted, not loved, not desired in relationships. So sometimes you got to look for the subtle hurts. It may not be something that irritates you, but it could be something that's really hurting your child.
Yeah, the thing that I never did like when it showed up, which was a great opportunity to train character in my kids, but I didn't like it when it showed up, was jealousy. When, or comparison, when they would say something along the lines of, she got this, I want that, and she got that, it would get all over me. And so I would say, how can we be happy for her? What is it that we can do that would bless her? How can we, what would that look like if we, fill in the blank, if we goodness. Served her or told her how proud of her we were?
Something I used to do to my brother all the time is like whatever he would order, I would order. Because I was the younger brother.
Oh, for food, so, at a restaurant?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's like a Coke or, or we went to, McDonald's or whatever. Well, I want the Big Mac too. Oh my goodness, and just drive him crazy. But what we would tell our kids now today is, wow, look at how your little brother is honoring you And so you can.
He wants to be just like you.
Exactly.
I remember telling them that when they were little. I mean, because they did the same thing. Because the little one wants to be like the big one, and so they'll do anything they can. And copying them is one of the ways. And so, that's an honor. That's a blessing. They want to be like you.
And so often, there's maybe a lack of empathy with our children to one another. There's an intolerance of behavior. Oh my goodness, get out of my room, or they don't. And what can we? There's so many different signs.
Yeah, reality is children are self-centered and they think about themselves, and so siblings are the best way to show them how to not think about themselves and to think about others. To have another little person that's wanting what they want and doing what they're doing and playing with what they're playing with, to have them take their eyes off themselves and look after that little one. So that's one of the ways that if you've got a child that's struggling with, or children that are struggling with jealousy, comparison, being mean to each other, selfish, withdrawing, even not wanting to be around their sibling, all of those things, remember the place where they're coming from is they're looking out more for themselves than they are for others.
And sometimes, today we talk about our kids and that they are best friends. They do invest in one another, that we do have good relationships with all of them. They all love Jesus, but then people say, well, what was it like when your kids were growing up? And we're like, oh my goodness, it wasn't like this. I mean, there were definitely some, there was definitely some relationship issues between our siblings, and they were hard. I mean, they were really, really hard, because it tends to take a long time for them to recover, to turn that tide. So once they get in a negative spot, you have to really work hard. And during that season, when you're working hard at it, with no guarantee it's going to change, it can be highly frustrating.
Well, yeah, you've got to think about every interaction that your children have with each other is an opportunity, and they can do it great, and it can be a blessing, and they can do it terrible, and it can be just get all over you, and they can do it just neutral, where it's like they're not really paying attention to each other.
And so during the holidays, you can say, hey, we're gonna have lots and lots of opportunities, and it's gonna be, it could be a little bit stressful, but you're thinking about it more from the long term. Is we want to use this season to help our relationships get better. And so what are we going to do that? And some of that is, so if for example, some of it comes from the parents. If the siblings are yelling at each other, and then you yell to make them stop,
right? And
you're as big a brat as they are, then that's not going to help. And so, what we want to do is say that this is real, that sibling fighting is super real. We've experienced it a lot. We've experienced a lot of relational issues with our kids, and so.
Well, I was going to talk about one of the relationship issues. Should we do that?
Sure.
I was going to talk about Molly and Macy. So that's our firstborn daughter, and then there's a second, and then the thirdborn, and Macy's our thirdborn daughter. And they were similar enough to where they would get on each other's nerves, and we would leave Molly in charge when we left, and Macy would just not obey or not cooperate or not do whatever it is.
Self-admitted now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Macy totally admitted it. And Molly was probably on the controlling side, and Macy didn't want to be controlled, and she didn't think Molly's idea was a good. I don't know. Who knows all the reasons that Macy didn't, but I remember.
Both of them super emotional.
Yeah. And then there's that. Super
God.
Passionate.
Yeah.
And so, and Macy, is just wanting to have fun with Madeline, and Molly's probably trying to tell him what to do. And anyway, so Molly, we were so grateful for Molly. One time we stopped and we got her a smoothie at Sonic, or a root beer float. I can't remember what exactly we bought her, but we brought it home to her, and she felt so bad about being terrible to Macy that she went and threw it on the back porch. I do not remember the story. Macy tells the story. So Macy comes in the next morning and sees this root beer float thrown on the back porch, and realized how horrible she had been to Molly, and Molly felt so bad about being horrible to Macy that I actually think it put a line in the sand in their relationship, that they were going to work on doing better and getting along and becoming best friends. And so just know that there are going to be heightened moments that happen with your kids, and that's okay, because hopefully on the other side of those moments there comes the relationship that you've been striving for.
So it's all about root beer floats. That's all you do. You just buy them root beer floats, during Christmas, and everything will be okay. Yeah, I mean, there's just all, some kids, we've definitely had our share that some have gotten along well and some have not gotten along. Suzanne, you've told the kids a lot that, hey, this is a training ground. This is another thing you can use. Yeah. This is a training ground for real life. That God, think about this, and this is something that we've told our kids a lot. God could have made all the siblings the same, but he chose to make them differently, just like usually a husband and wife are different. So because he chose to make them differently, he has a purpose in that. Mm-hmm. And he had a purpose in bringing your siblings into the family. So guess what? We got to figure out what that purpose is. And as we figure out what God's trying to teach you, then it won't be as hard anymore.
Yeah, we used to say all the time that, let's say one of their sisters had just the most annoying way they interacted, and they said, I can't stand it. And I said, well, you've got to figure out a way to stand it. Ask God to show you how to make a list of ways that you can create, you can be loving and kind toward that, because if not, then you're going to have a classmate, a best friend, a teacher, a roommate, a coach, a boss, a spouse, a child that's going to have that same annoying, personality behavior that you can't stand. And if you don't figure out how to deal with it and get on the other side of it, then God's going to continue to give you opportunities to love that kind of issue. And so my kids are like, oh, their eyes are really big, like, oh my gosh.
Well, and in that way, you become, instead of a frustrated parent, you become a teaching parent, an instructive parent that's helping them to be motivated to have great relationships with their siblings, rather than, just all I do is get yelled at by mom. Are you going to create a downward spiral or an upward spiral, basically, with these relationships?
Well, and kids, just like I said, they were self-centered. They also, children live in the present. They cannot see past what's right in front of them in the moment that they're living. And so anytime that we can pull them into future, that their behavior is going to build what's happening in the future, the way they're interacting with people is going to affect how they're going to interact with people in the future. When we can do that, it kind of takes them out of their self-centered, present-minded bubble and gives them an opportunity to go, okay, this is bigger than me. This is something that's beyond me.
And what we're giving you is principles you can tell them that are kind of universal, that will help them to believe in what you're saying. And for example, one of the things, it's even, and parents, we need these beliefs too. For example, one of those beliefs is that your siblings they love each other, and they want, even though they're frustrated with their younger sibling, they still love them. God has put in their DNA a connection there, just like he puts a connection with the parents. And so we have to tap into that. We have to tap into that love that they have for them. Even though there may be a dislike for the sibling, there is a love for them. And so we can tap into that to help them to overcome the dislike. And they will if we do it consistently.
Yes, and I love that. I mean, that's one of the. We'll go into some super practical things to do, but one of them is to call out the love and the like. And you can say, "Oh, you love your brother. You don't like that he's playing with your Legos and you want to play with your Legos, but you love your brother. So how can we serve him? How can we share our Legos?" And so to even use that terminology, love and like, and how can we
and that's great. And then another principle is that prayer works. So in this season, let's say that you're gearing up. What if you geared up your prayer? In I think it's Luke 18. It talks about the widow and the judge, and this judge. It says that they were asking Jesus how to pray, and Jesus said, "Well, let me tell you a parable." And he talks about this judge who was kind of evil. He didn't want to be bothered, but this widow kept coming to him and bothering him. And he says, I don't care about her issue, but because this widow keeps bothering me, I'm going to grant her justice. Mm-hmm. And so Jesus was saying, hey, God, bother me. Yeah, come to me with your request and believe. And the widow in that day, widows were powerless. Mm-hmm. So if we see ourselves as, not that we are powerless, it's that God is so powerful that we tap into that. So, we invite you as a principle and just as a practice to cry out to God, Lord, this daughter and this son are not getting along at all. So Lord, please, show me wisdom in how to to interact with them, but also just give them a heart that is turned toward each other.
And then along with praying for them, so many times when our children didn't get along with each other, when we would go into their room at night and we would say, how do you think you and, Macy are getting along? How do you think you and Michael are getting along? Are they just driving crazy? Let's pray about it. Well, let's ask God, because have them praying for their sibling. And sometimes it's hysterical. Lord, just help them, just change my brother, change him not to be such a brat, or change my sister to not be so mean. And so we would, laugh and say yes and amen. And Lord, how can you change me? Help change me.
Yeah. Help them never to take my toys.
Yes, help them never to. And so that's a great way to turn your children's hearts toward each other too, by showing them how to invite God in. Once again, you're training them for future relationships. And what you're giving them the example and the opportunity to cry out to God on behalf of a relationship that's not working. Once again, could be their spouse, could be their boss, could be their roommate, whichever relationship that God's puts in their lives to draw them to Him. The training starts under your roof as a little kid.
Yeah. If you go to our website and you, or go to Amazon and find either on our store on our website or Amazon, and you find our guide to building relationships, we have a whole section on building the sibling relationships.
Yes.
And even if you buy that guide, which is cheap, then it gives you a whole video course on it as well. So there's a way to tap in. So there's lots of additional resources we have. But let me just bring out this a couple of those tips. I want you to have the whole thing. If you're very interested in this, there is a whole lot of information we do on having siblings as best friends. Just a couple of things that we point out is to look at the role of the older sibling and the younger sibling. And the older sibling role is, I just feel like this is a gold mine for parents. And it was very, very effective with helping us overcome relational issues with our kids, because you appeal to the responsibility of the older child and you appeal to them helping you. You are the parent, and if you can get your child to think they're helping you with something, which they really are, because their influence on their younger sibling is huge. We always say that what happens when siblings as best friends is it multiplies our parenting ability. If you get them on your team, then they multiply your parenting. You tell them something and they go tell them the same thing. Well, guess what? You've multiplied your parenting.
Yeah, we say all the time that Makeda is by far our best child, and it's not because we raised him. It's because the 6 siblings raised him.
He's the youngest of the boys. He's the youngest of the 7.
Our youngest of the 7, and it's not because of us. It's because he was raised so well by the others.
And be careful we got to be careful about the whole best child thing too.
Oh, yeah. You really aren't supposed to say that. But I only say that by giving all the others credit.
Yeah, but really the older, and that's what we talk about, going from fighting to investing. And that's a thought process we want to implant into your head and into your heart, because when you believe that can happen, then you will go for it. First, you have to change your belief.
Right.
Then you can start acting. And then you start telling the kids that, hey, in our family, we invest in one another. We don't fight with one another. We invest in one another. God's put your younger sibling in your family so that you can invest in him. How are you going to invest? I don't want to invest in him. He's annoying. Okay, do you want to do what you want to do, or do you want to do what God wants to do?
Right.
Well, and when you do what God wants to do, then it unlocks his blessing in your life.
And we would say, and you're the number one person that can help him not be annoying, because he thinks you're cool and he wants to be like you. And so that's calling the older sibling to a higher standard. That's what we would do. And then we would also connect with the younger sibling too. I mean, the one thing that I can remember saying is stop being a brat. Nobody wants to be around a brat. Don't be that way. If you want to be around your big brother or your big sister, then you got to play what they want to play. You can't take their toys. You can't be a brat. Nobody wants to be around a brat.
It's a privilege to go into your older brother or sister's room, and you can't go in there and take their toys and
break their things.
Yes, or take their candy or whatever. Then they're not going to want you in there. Do you want to be wanted in there? Then go ask for the candy and let them be generous to you and say, hey, can I have a piece of candy, or can I play with this? And then watch them say, they might say no, but over time you start to wear them down a little bit, and they say yeah, and they want to help you, and they want to be it goes back to what we were saying before. Man, when the older sibling when both of them are doing their jobs, it is just beautiful. I mean, that you see the respect that the younger is giving the older, and then the respect and care that the older gives the younger as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about, we've talked really theory, we've talked a bunch of principles and values and all the things. Maybe let's talk about some practical things and send these people into the holidays.
Yeah, so I think one of the things, I don't even know how the tradition started. I will give credit to my wife. I'm sure that you did it. But we really, one of the things we did, I think, that has really worked to endear our kids to one another is we had them buy presents for one another. And
whether at Christmas time or birthdays, just to invest in each other.
Yeah, but particularly at Christmas, because, especially when we started having more kids, it became very difficult for every kid to buy presents for every other kid. But it was important, and it became a really tradition of our family that, I think we've just now started the last couple of years not doing it, but
No, the kids still do it. We just don't participate.
That's true.
The kids still draw. They do. But what we would do, because it was pretty expensive, is I remember we would start out in early fall, and we would start raising money, making money, earning money. I guess it's trying to say earning money. And they would do things around the house, and they would make the money, because to us, it was valuable that they were spending their own money on it. And then we would go out with each one of them individually, and they would buy the gifts for everybody, and they would find the perfect gift within their budget. And honestly, there were lots of times that they found the perfect gift, and they didn't even have anywhere close to enough money. And I would say, well, let me help you with that. I can help you with that.
Or they went in together.
Or they went in together, exactly, because it was the perfect gift. And that was the whole goal, is we got out and they were thinking about their sibling and what would delight and bless their sibling. They weren't thinking about themselves. And every time when we're out there, they're like, can I buy myself something? Can I buy can I get this? And can I get that? And it was so good to be able to say no, but I'll tell, this brother or the sister that this is what you want.
And then to watch them, how they went with, they started having themes, like one kid would buy T-shirts of animals for everybody based on the animal that they thought that child was, and it became like, well, you're a lion because you're a leader or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's true. And we started speaking words over the presents that we gave, like a prophetic word, or we would write a little something about why I got this gift for you.
But what does that do? It makes them think about, like Suzanne was saying, how do you make them think about each other?
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, when two siblings were having trouble, you would think, oh, let's separate them. Nope, let's put them together. And we would put them together more, because we just say, hey, until you guys can learn to get along, you're gonna play more together, because that's what's important to us, and that helps you think about the other person.
Oh, I just remember with Molly and Madeline, they had huge breakthrough when so they were much older. Molly was driving, so she was 17, and Madeline, she drove Madeline to school, and it broke open their relationship. I mean, the time that they had in the car, playing in the car, and it even set the standard for Madeline, so that when she started driving her siblings to school, then she made sure that it was a lot of fun, and they would turn the music up, and they would race through big puddles and and they just tell story after story of the memories that they made in the car because of that quality time, that intentional time that they had together.
That, with Molly and Madeline, it had been years of not necessarily fighting really bad, but I mean, there was just a lot when they were growing up, when Molly was 13 and Madeline was 9, or Molly was
right. So Molly was just far enough in the next set level that her children, her siblings they weren't relevant. They weren't important to her.
Yeah. But then when there was a breakthrough when they did go to school together in the car, because Molly said, I figured out that Madeline was a really cool person.
Yes, I remember her saying that.
Yeah, there was a breakthrough, but because they spent time together, and we didn't say, oh, well, we're going to take Madeline to school because they fight or whatever. It's like you just keep going, and so this holiday season, instead of separating them, what if you put them together, and what if you do intentional activities together with, maybe instead of going out with one kid, you go out with two kids, and they have to decide together what they're buying their little brother or something.
Yeah, I love that. So I've got two things to say about that intentional time. One is that Maddox and Michael, they struggled with their relationship. And I remember when they started sharing a room together that it became different. And so I give that advice to people all the time now. If you've got two kids that aren't getting along, put them in the same room together. Yeah. And so maybe over this holiday season, they have a slumber party every night together in one of their rooms. Maybe they rotate back and forth rooms if they're in, just to put them. What you're doing is you're creating more time together in each other's space to make good connection lines.
And I think that's also during the holidays is, what if you relax the rules a little bit? What if you, in order to build those relationships, maybe we don't eat popcorn on the floor normally, but, we're going to eat popcorn on the floor tonight, or we're going to watch that movie, or whatever it is, because we're just going to do something that's fun,
Yeah.
We're going to, have an extra cookie or whatever it is that bringing that joy and fun into the atmosphere.
Okay, and I'm going to say something that might stress you out as parents, but when my kids, when they shared a room together or when they had sibling slumber parties with each other, Don and I did not go in there and tell them to be quiet and to stop talking. We let them. I mean, sometimes we would sit outside the door, and Don and I would, and giggle and laugh at what they were talking about, because it was the craziest, bizarre, most silliest things ever. But it was absolutely darling. And in my mind, that was much more valuable than their sleep.
Yeah, and what if they do sleep till 10
And I
o'clock?
love sleep. Yeah. I value sleep.
I mean, and to our advantage, they usually would sleep later the next morning, so we didn't have to get up.
Or we would have quiet time the next day, and they would be tired, and so they would sleep during their nap time. And so, to me, it was super important that they connected to each other. I mean, and then one more thing I keep thinking about is that Don went on, and the kids were older, but you went on trips to Washington D.C. and you would grab a couple kids and you guys would go make memories together. And I just think that's a great way to do that too. Is maybe not, I mean, for us, because we had so many kids that we rarely could take them all, but we would take a couple of them, especially if their relationship wasn't quite so close.
And even during the holidays, one of the things you can do is like, we always went, and one of our traditions is as a family, we always went and bought a Christmas tree.
Oh,
so,
yes.
what are your traditions of taking the family together? And, is it hard? Yes. I mean, there were 9 of us going to get a Christmas tree.
And they would whine and complain. Do we have to? I don't want to. And then we would go get eggnog, ice cream, and eggnog beverage. And we would
make eggnog shakes.
Make eggnog shakes. Yeah, the G-rated kind of eggnog, not the other. Don't worry. We weren't.
And so what are your, hopefully out of this, we encourage you to fight for your sibling relationships. We talked about sibling dynamics during the holidays. What if come January you think, wow, our sibling relationships have taken a step forward? Not a huge step. I mean, they're incremental steps. But what if you looked up and said, wow, I think we did some things that we benefited. 2 things. We talk about sibling relationships. You benefit your relationships with the children and the children's relationships together. That's a win. That's a win for Christmas, and that's a win for the holidays. So often we get to the end of the holidays, and all we can think about is the busyness, and all we can think about is the fighting. And so we don't want you to think like that. We want you to think about. We want you to look back January 15th or 10th or 5th or whatever, and just go, wow, that was a rewarding season. It wasn't easy, but we did some things that were good, and our relationships took steps forward.
Okay, now so don't be stressed, but we're just going to give you just to remind you, we're giving you just a touch of homework. You're going to look at that dashboard. You're going to line up all your family members. You're going to rate the relationships between your kids. You're going to pay attention to the relationships that are not so great. You're going to invest in some intentional conversation. You're going to ask your kids to invest in each other. You're going to create some opportunities.
Some slumber parties.
Yes, some opportunities for experiences for them to be together.
Yeah.
And then because we have found that everything that you put some time, effort, and energy into, it blossoms, it grows, it becomes a blessing. And so what if you look at those relationships, see the ones that need a little bit of watering, and you just water them this season?
Awesome. Well, we believe and pray that your holiday experience is going to be amazing. We are starting to wrap up 2024 in our podcast season.
Just a few more left.
And so we wish you the best in the holidays. We'll continue to come to you for another couple of podcasts. And in the meantime, go be crazy with all of your sibling relationships. crazycoolfamily.com. Thanks for listening to the Crazy Cool Family podcast. We hope this episode inspired and challenged you to invest in your family. We want every family in the world to know about God's vision for their family. To help get the word out, consider taking a minute and giving our podcast a 5-star review and share why you love listening. Or share our podcast on social media with your friends and family. We believe that family is God's idea, so help us spread His vision for family by telling others about our podcast today.